Hi, everybody. Thank you for making the time to join us today for this quarter's Yapster new feature showcase. Very excited to tell you about the next generation of CPL integration that we've developed with the team there. And today we've got some very special guests. We've got Jamie, who's the Director of Learning at CPL, which recently became part of the Access family. And also we're very privileged that we've got Blackwell, who's CEO of Ten Entertainment Group PLC, that's also kindly agreed to come on and talk about his perspective on the market, the business, and what we're doing together at Yapster with CPL. So for those of you that have never been to a Ten venue, this is what you're missing out on from a customer perspective. Fantastic places for family fun. But actually what's most interesting from our perspective as a sort of operator tech platform is what's under the hood of Graham's machine that you might not necessarily see just from the customer perspective. So this is how we think about it, or this is my interpretation of the instruction that Graham and his team have given us along the Yapster journey so far. So there's three parts to their sort of leadership model. So the first part is being really clear on the business strategy. And Graham will talk a little later, I'm sure, about some of the things you can see in the bullet points there. Once you're clear on the strategy about how you're going to win in the market and the business that you want to be and where you're going, obviously it's critical that you get the right people on the bus. That's all about culture. We hear about that all the time, sort of endlessly on LinkedIn. But our experience of working with Ten and Graham's team is that they really live this. And so they're very, very clear on what the right type of person to work from Ten is and how they invest in reinforcing those cultural cues. And then ultimately, if you've got a clear and the right strategy and you've got the right people on the bus, ultimately that should in theory translate to business performance. And again, Ten have got a very clear set of performance metrics and a performance culture that manages to be both fun, but also successful, which drives growth, employee experience, and an opportunity, and obviously ultimately also shareholder value. So it's a really interesting model. We've sort of followed this on the journey at Yapster in terms of how we think about our own product strategy. So as you can see here, we've got a talk more, care more, sell more proposition effectively, which follows what I've just set out for Ten. Now, in terms of how that's actually expressed in the Yapster products, many of you that are on this session are Yapster customer organizations or thinking about it. So you know that we're a mobile messaging solution that connects to the underlying HR system to enable people to send one-to-one or group sort of WhatsApp style chats, but also to post content on a private company timeline in a sort of Instagram style interface. So if you think about the Ten strategy, what's interesting to us is how Ten use the various parts of our product and the intersection of parts in our product, and indeed partner products, which we'll come on to with Jamie later, to deliver that strategy. So at the intersection between strategy and culture is, of course, recognition. And again, I'm sure that we'll tease out from Graham the way that he uses Yapster and other tools to recognize his colleagues to make sure that his strategy lands on the ground and continues to reinforce the culture. Then you've got teamwork, which is really all about real-time collaboration in service of their cultural and business objectives. We've done quite a lot of stuff in the platform with Graham to make sure that teams are collaborating locally, but also across the organization, breaking down silos. Because of course, if they were running on, for example, a series of disconnected WhatsApp groups, you wouldn't be able to break down those silos because of course, people wouldn't be able to talk across the boundaries of the groups that they'd set up. And then finally, you've got leadership, of course, which connects the sort of strategy to the performance elements of the business, in that Graham and his team will be setting the vision, laying down challenges to the team to ensure that people are engaged, but also that they're doing things that drive customer experience and also business outcomes. And we're trying to continue to evolve the Yapster product, both in terms of our own in-house engineering and the collaborative innovation with partners like Jamie and CPL, and some of the others that you'll see on the apps tab in one of the screens to follow. And we're really trying to position ourselves as being sort of central to the tech side of that people and leadership strategy. So let's look at a couple of numbers just so we can see like what have we achieved so far together with Ten and partners. So we started working with Graham's team in 2019. As of today, they've got just over 1,000 colleagues, and 94% of those are onboarded to their communication system, which is us in this case. There are 85% active of those colleagues in the last 7 days at time of giving this presentation. They've got a hugely communicative culture for all the reasons that I've just been through. So you can just see sort of 16,000 group and private Yaps, as we call them. Those are sort of one-to-one or group chats. 700 newsfeed posts. So again, that's your sort of LinkedIn, Instagram style interface where people are sharing information across the entire organization. And then this is really nice. We've had the first version of the CPL integration in beta since April, and we've been investing in that alongside 10pin ever since. And that's driving a pretty significant click-through rate as well. So you can see some of the numbers there that we're getting in terms of validating that this stuff is working for 10 in numbers. So how does it all work from a stack perspective? Okay, so the first thing is to say is that underlying 10's employee tech stack is their employee record. So in this case, it's Forth, but that's effectively the HR system, because of course every employee has an employee number. The employee number defines the corporate identity for each individual. Through integrations, that then drives Yapster, CPL, and other sort of best of breed solutions to be able to know who works for 10, where do they work, know when they've gone live or when they've left the organization. And because we all share that common sense of identity, we're all then able to speak to one another from a systems perspective. And then just the last image you can see there on the right, all of those technologies are brought together on a sort of bundled best of breed basis in the Yapster apps tab. So you can see news for the sort of Instagram style posting in the tabs along the bottom of that image on the right, Yaps for one-to-one and group messaging, Find for the mobile directory, the records that come through from Forth, and turn that into an addressable address book. But the apps tab is where actually you've got these jump off points into partner systems that can frankly do critical operational or cultural solutions that Yapster doesn't cover in-house. So then drilling down into the CPL integration, you've got the apps tab again here. And what we've done as the first point is we've created a single sign-on integration so that when any colleague at 10 goes into the Yapster apps tab, they can click the CPL icon here and it will instantly log them into the CPL platform without needing to remember user ID or password. So that's the sort of basic level of integration. And that is something that's becoming increasingly common across the industry. What we're really proud of, though, is after you've clicked that, I don't say why I'm proud. I mean, Jamie's going to come on in a second and really, we should really be proud of his engineering team rather than ours in this instance. But basically, you can log in and you can see the CPL tiles, as you can see there. It should be said that actually this is the sort of generic out-of-the-box CPL experience if you were to replicate this. Graham's team have actually gone a bit further with the CPL team and customized their CPL experience, so it feels a bit more sort of on-brand and the tiles are particularly relevant. But I think the most sort of advanced part of the integration that the CPL team have delivered with us and for joint customers is these two slides here, these two images here that show the ability for the CPL platform to actually create social and social learning content natively within the Yapster platform. So they effectively can create automated sort of Instagram style social posts within the Yapster experience to reach all of those engaged 10ping colleagues. But also they can create one-to-one or group messages. In this case, the example on the far right of the screen here is to effectively notify people about course content and the like. And I'm sure Jamie's going to get deeper into the functionality that this new integration delivers. So from a proposition perspective, sort of going all the way back to where we started, the whole point of this is to deliver Graham and his team's strategy, which is about talking more, caring more, selling more, performance culture and strategy. In order to be able to make that actually work in practice, it's really important to have an employee-centric setup, both technologically and from a leadership perspective. So by combining technologies and making sure that we all play nicely together, frankly, Graham and his team have been able to create an employee tech experience that's actually sympathetic to the colleague, where we're trying to reduce friction as much as we possibly can, so that they can, without needing to remember IDs and passwords, can jump between systems and can engage with personalized content. Because of course, and again, Graham can speak for himself in a moment, but what I understand the 10 team want is each individual discipline within 10 being able to be elite at what they do. And then under the sort of umbrella of a culture, sort of common cultural understanding that enables them to collaborate across those sort of functional areas as well. So targeted learning really helps with that. And then, of course, it's about making things immediate as possible because we want the organization to be responsive. So that's just a quick sort of, 5-10 minute setup on what we've done together. What I'm going to do now is just stop sharing these slides and bring in the guys, and we can just have a bit more of a conversation. about what we're doing here and maybe what's coming next. So gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time to do this.
No problem.
Absolutely happy to be here, Rob.
Great, guys. Well, thank you. So Jamie, it would be awesome if we can just quickly start with the CPL perspective. Quite a few of the people that are going to be watching are going to be Yapster customers. So I think like it's only fair to them to be honest about the fact that your integration actually fills some gaps in the Yapster product. I'd love it if you just from your perspective, how do you think about the work that you've done sort of augmenting the Yapster platform to create some value that wouldn't necessarily be there if you just bought our platform on a standalone basis?
Yeah, I think obviously there's the filling the kind of headline gap of the kind of formal learning side of things, and kind of the informal kind of opportunities to learn through a platform like ours. But then there's the kind of connective tissue side of things as well, where there's a lot of opportunities to make more of certain communication. And I think over the past 18 months, obviously communication to teams has become more important than ever has done. Often just providing relatively simplistic updates, but at an extremely important time. And I think we saw a kind of real shift in how our platform was used in the context of people's development. And I think obviously the dynamic of that has changed now. It's been more front foot rather than reactive. But I think communication and learning are kind of two things that are inextricably linked. And often as I've mentioned to you before, there's a kind of a latent opportunity to make more of the kind of connective tissue of the two things too. Often a lot of points raised, in people visiting sites, particularly multi-site organizations, they'll spot opportunities and little things that can be shared through forums like this, and kind of to be able to be fed back through the pot into the platform to something more formal, to a slightly different piece of content that then, say someone shares a video of how to do something in a great way, and that gets great traction, and that has an impact. Well, we can then put that onto our platform and measure the impact of that in a different way and see the engagement on it in a learning sense too. So there's kind of real kind of two-way kind of point. And I think, outside, you kind of used the term employee-centric before, and I think often we'll talk about integration, or often there's talk of integration from a consumer stack side of things, and rightly so, it's important to understand who we're selling to, what we're selling. But right now, the focus on teams is, more important than anything else, the narrative everywhere, the challenges that we have with that, on recruitment, so on and so forth. So to make sure that we're making the most of the tools and the systems that they're using, and kind of unlocking every bit of value that might be there, I think is really, really crucial. So probably a little bit of a rambling response to your I was trying to go rambling rather than rant. So that's hopefully it reviews it.
No, I agree. I mean, the way I think about it is I'm obviously proud of Yapster and the way that it hopefully mirrors some of the sort of the real life culture and fun that happens within 10. But of course, a lot of what you do in Yapster is necessarily ephemeral. It's sort of fleeting, passing communications. And when like magical things happen in the organization, sometimes you do want that sort of recorded and institutionalized. So the ability to be able to then direct colleagues back to organized content in a connected learning platform, I think is really, really powerful. But
sorry to jump in, but I think that learning and doesn't have to be formal, and it can be ephemeral and kind of situational and in the moment too. And I think the kind of connecting the two things together kind of highlights the importance of that and gives it a place and a kind of channel of its own being. It doesn't have to be, of course, compliance is important, but selling more and caring more often doesn't get delivered through in compliance. It gets delivered through in kind of the operation and how people are, and how they talk to their teams, and how they kind of share success, which again is down to kind of recognizing people too. So I think it's kind of really well nicely interconnected.
And that's actually a good way to bring in Graham. So Graham, when I think about what it's like to work for you, and I don't know what your other sort of suppliers would say, but generally you've allowed us to be creative about how we deliver solutions. You're just pretty clear on what you want the end result to be. So did we butcher our description of your sort of leadership operating model, or was that pretty close to how you think about it?
No, it's absolutely right. I mean, listening to you both, I mean, we're hospitality at the end of the day. We're here to provide a memorable service, value for money, entertainment. It's very difficult in this day and age with what's out there from an entertainment perspective to, win any pound that you can. So having the ability to engage with your employees for me is first and foremost. I think I've been with this business for 30 years and having started off emptying the rubbish bins and realizing that maybe God might visit my centre one day and I might be lucky enough to see the CEO, that always stuck in my mind over the years. And what I wanted to do was have something or an ability to touch everybody within the business. In any which way. I'm very aware that I can't be in all places at all time. I don't see the new starters. I don't see people that have been working in the business, for a couple of years at a time, which is really frustrating. So, for me, it was, okay, how do we connect? How do we deliver on what we say we want to do? And probably most importantly is actually speak to everybody. The learning part of it is massive, without having the ability to train new people into the business, that's one thing, but not being able to communicate with them as well is quite something else. So, whether you've worked for the business for a day, a week, 10 years, 20 years, I have the ability now to talk on a social level, social platform to each and everybody, and they have the ability to talk to me at any point, 24/7, they can drop me a line. So, when you bring a culture together, and we are first and foremost a family, and as far as I'm concerned, whether we're talking about the guys in Glasgow, whether we're talking about the guys in Plymouth, for us, we're all on the same side. We're all trying to do the right thing. And what I don't want to do is raise expectation and not deliver. I'm accountable. I'm touchable. They can get to me. They can speak to me. They can one-to-one me. They can inbox me. So, again, probably taking Jamie's lead on rambling, the culture for me is first and foremost. If I can't provide a happy atmosphere for my employees, if I can't deliver on what I say I'm going to deliver, then I don't create a culture of trust, fun, enjoyment. So, training is absolutely there, but first and foremost, it's the culture and how you deal with your crew and your team, how you bring them on, how you develop them. So, for me, the platform gave me the social aspect, the commercial aspect, the business aspect, the fun aspect, the training aspect, all at a touch of a button. And bearing in mind, we're talking about Gen Zs, the majority of my team, and therefore, they're super techie. Me, on my mobile phone, I still wind it up, but these guys are all over it. So, it really gives me a great opportunity to get to people that I wouldn't, you give a regional manager a mobile phone, you can give, the general manager a mobile phone, but some of our guys will not have access to internal company emails unless they're actually in the business. I had a situation the other week where one of my team members in one of the sites was sort of put under a bit of pressure from a customer, which wasn't particularly nice for her, and he gave me the ability to message her direct 20 minutes after I'd got to hear about it and actually make sure she was okay, how she was feeling. And you can just see, in the response, oh my God, you're speaking to me, the CEO, titles for me are nothing. It's her welfare that I was concerned about. So, again, rambling a little bit, but I think if you bring together, if you want to create a culture where you absolutely want to show you care, then open the door. So the platform allows me to communicate to all members of staff. And I think, the stats that you put up earlier, you can quite clearly see, 16,000 yaps. And that was just for July, don't forget. That wasn't, since we've opened, since we used it, that was 16,000 yaps in 1 month.
I was going to say, actually, have you been surprised by your organization's numbers? Like, I know you always talk in terms of teams, so you'll be too humble to say it, but I know for a fact that when you did a reopening message after lockdown, and I think you guys were as hard hit as anybody in the economy, alongside probably nightclubs. And I remember you got your opening message, I think was seen by more than 1,000 out of only just over 1,000 colleagues in 24 hours. I think you had something like a 13% reaction rate. 77.8% comment rate is pretty astonishing. I don't think that's a Yapster thing. That's definitely a 10-pin thing, which is interesting. But be interested just to hear your thoughts, because I know you love numbers in your business. I'd be interested to know how you think about the numbers and why you think your numbers are so high, because it's not Yapster, because all of our customers are on the same platform and they don't all have your numbers.
it'd be great to say just the fact that I was posting it out there was the reason why they also came to watch it.
It's all you, right?
I'd love to say that, but I can't. I mean, there's an element of the messages that I was giving out at the time where, you know, okay, guys, we're about to open. We need to make sure we've done this. This is what we're going to be looking at. You know, planning the strategic opening of 46 businesses geographically is hard at the best of times, but making sure, you know, we were unsure as to how many people were going to come back off a furlough, if any. You know, so the Yapster platform was really good for us because when you're engaging with those individuals and you know it's going company wide, you know, if I got 50 responses, then I'd be concerned about how many people were coming back from furlough. So it gave me insight as to the engagement, you know, and we'd use Yapster all the way through as our key communication tool. So any messages that were going out on the state of affairs from the company, profitability, you know, longevity, all of those. So we used it all the way through. So it probably furlough for us and the lockdown period was really good because what it allowed us to do was, you know, the crew were waiting for something to come out so that they could see where the business was. So that sort of probably underpinned the fact that when we did finally put out that message that, you know, everybody was really excited, you know, we've been in lockdown, we're finally coming out, what's happening? And we used the opportunity to launch slightly different forward-facing customer branding with the game on. You can see behind me, new uniforms. So there was quite a lot there, Rob. As I said, you know, it's not, but was I surprised? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you sort of like 95% of your employees are sort of, you know, responding within 24 hours to something you put out there, it's heartwarming, right? And ever since then, what we found is that it's turned more into a social media platform. You know, it was great for us to chuck out some recognition and reward to the guys, but what I find more than anything else now is that everybody within the business recognizes and rewards their own guys, their own teams. You know, I love it. I could sit there of an evening and watch the manager in Castleford patting the guys in the food area on the back on what a wonderful delivery they've had from a set of pizzas that have gone out to a works night out. You know, that's how much detail we get into. And I'm looking at the pizza thinking, I'll have a slice of that next time I go up there. So, you know, it's just a great platform. Yes, I was over the moon with the engagement and subsequently it hasn't dropped off. But I think, you know, the great thing about it is it's not just a working tool, communications tool, it's a social environment as well that the crew have really bought into, and I think it's a great opportunity for anybody that hasn't got it.
Thank you, Graham. I appreciate that. Jamie, I'll tell you what's interesting, listening to, and we've got some questions coming in, so I'm going to pick those up just in a second. But Jamie, one of the things that when we first started Yapster, one of the things I was a bit worried about was this movement towards social learning, because like as a standalone messaging solution, we're always worried that we were going to struggle to compete against bundled social HR solutions, bundled social learning platforms, bundled social benefits platforms. And I think what's happened actually is that because companies probably do need us all to integrate and play nicely because no one does everything perfectly, we've ended up being able to in some ways be connective tissue between other best of breed solutions. But you, of course, on a standalone basis, you would compete with social learning systems. Like, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on how you think about social learning as a movement, like how CPL positions itself vis-a-vis social learning platforms, like what we can do from a Yapster perspective as a partner to make sure we sort of win that battle for hearts and minds of customers that might be persuaded by the social learning movement.
I think that it comes down to the business and what tools they use and how they use it. I mean, often things, you know, learning will be taking place socially in places that you can't see right now. So using something, Yapster or otherwise, or in the kind of the parts of our platform that allow for it to, means that you can have visibility, you can share it, all points that you know, can be similarly raised kind of in questions and things. It creates that connectivity of to more people. You can trace it and track it and see what's having an impact and things. I think the thing for us is what's going to have value to the customer. And you know, we have overlapping features with Yapster, but you know, wherever the volume of people is and where the kind of more rich features are is where people will go. And I think you know, our focus is learning and getting people into that. You know, our focus is you know, getting more people to be able to engage with their learning. And you know, the point of working with yourselves is to allow, you know, the functional side of it, outside of some of the kind of bits before that I mentioned that are maybe a little bit more of an aspiration and an ideal. The functional side of it is that we want to tell people they've got training they need to do because they need to be safe to work, you know, as for one thing, and they need to know that there's a survey ready for them to complete, and they need to know that their appraisal is ready to go, and they need to know some of the really functional basic things that is an important kind of touch point with a team member. So I think kind of probably moving away a little bit from the question, but the principle of social learning is it happens everywhere. So it happens in text messages, it happens in WhatsApp, it happens through email, and it's for us, it's about trying to centralize as much of it as possible and then harness as much of it as possible too, because as I said before, there's latent opportunity and ideas and businesses from content that could be created by people that we don't want to miss. We want to take advantage of all of that.
I really love it that you guys are so open and clear about that. It's the same with us. Like we're driven by engagement numbers, clearly, like sort of as we would if we were a consumer facing social platform. I think it's really cool that CPL just wants to be where the people are, where it creates learning opportunities. I think rather than trying to shoehorn all of the users into something that you've built in the product and then hope that they then have those moments sort of solely there. I think that speaks a lot for the CPL business. So we've got a couple of questions now. Kieran asked Graham how he used the tool to connect with his team personally, and then said asked and answers, because Graham, of course, gave the example of the colleague that had suffered a difficult experience, and Graham was able to have a meaningful one-to-one connection on Yapster, whereas maybe sending him or her a WhatsApp might have been a bit creepy. Duncan's asked, have you seen any significantly greater participation in team members taking learning modules after the integration with Yapster? Jamie, I don't know if you know the either the exact or sort of just summary learning engagement rates since we've connected systems. Do you know?
The data offhand, I don't know, and it's a good question. I think that the reality is that, and particularly in this case, engagement is good anyway, so it's not like there is opportunity to kind of see huge increases. I think where the benefit of something like this is in terms of where engagement is good is to make things quicker and more responsive and to kind of tighten things up. So to have where the communication is happening, if we can tell people that they're a lot more likely to see something quicker rather than reduce the lead time from someone doing their training that's important, also the new module that's been given to them or a new survey or whatever it may be, if we can shorten that time frame to get things done quicker, that's the kind of real benefit of this too. So there's obviously the getting more people engaged. People can access the platform in their kind of traditional way directly as they would normally or previously rather, and then this kind of gives them a supplementary and in principle an easy way to do it too. So I think the bot side of things in terms of that kind of personality that you can almost build within the centre of business around training too, that kind of builds that builds up from the basics really in terms of telling people something's ready and hopefully making that a little bit of a quicker process.
Yeah, I saw that. Sorry, Graham, go on.
I was just going to say, from Tempin's perspective, since April and sort of the dropping away of the furlough and us re-engaging with the business, we've had 3,700 click-throughs from Yapster into CPL. That's a little bit difficult to measure historically, pure and simply because we'd obviously put the COVID training procedures and everything online that the guys needed to do. So there's an argument to say that we are seeing a significantly increased number of participation through the platform, but that obviously would be driven by the new learning that we put on there regarding sort of COVID operating procedures. But having looked at the historical numbers versus where we are now, there is a significant increase. But as I said, I wouldn't want to say everything is just down to the platform. Elements of it are because of the sort of subsequent COVID and opening procedures we had to put into place.
Cheers, Graham. Another great question here is what difference, you mentioned you've been with Ten for a long time. What different styles of leadership have you seen be effective throughout your career? Because we talk a lot about social leadership in the Yapster platform, and I think people sometimes wrongly assume you have to be like let's be honest, as much of an extrovert as I am, for example, to enjoy doing that. I'd love to just hear you riff a little bit on the different type of leaders that you've seen be effective, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about what type of style you've found to work for you, both in person and digitally.
I think, there's many different types of leadership styles. Many are effective and many aren't. So, I think it would be foolish for me to sort of try and pinpoint one particular area. I think more than anything for me, and there's one of my learning colleagues that are on this call, and I learned from him myself. Duncan, I know you're out there, and thank you for joining today. But even at this stage, you're always learning. And I think one thing that I took from Duncan, probably more than anybody else, was that you say you care, you must care, so demonstrate that you care. And I think that for me is first and foremost is, if you care about the people and they can see it and you're passionate about what you do, I think, good leaders are never half-hearted. You're all in, and you show that, and that resonates, and it flows through the people that you're surrounded by and that you work with. And I think people need to know what's expected of them, where they stand. And I think if you're clear with that, and you're consistent with that, then and people know where they stand, and they know that you care, and you're not being disingenuous. You deliver on what you say. I think there's lots of good things and lots of bad things, but I think they're the few things that are key to me, and that have helped me get to where I am.
That's awesome, and I won't throw Jamie under the bus, so I'll just take this hit personally. So, talking leadership, as the CEO of Yapster, what would you like me to focus hardest on over the next year?
Is that to me, sorry, or Jamie? I thought it was to Jamie.
That was to you, because I was going to ask what would you like Jamie to focus on hardest, but I think that's a bit cruel.
I think, listen, I'm numbers driven. I love my numbers, and I'm it's probably one of the key things. And I think, we're working together currently on analytical side of things. But I think, putting out the understanding what the numbers are telling me is always key to me. And I think we're at an early stage between us and yourselves as to putting certain ideas into the business that allow geographically across the whole country to sort of measure their own performance and sort of go into bat against themselves. We don't want to be bottom, we want to be top, we want to progress, we want to do well. So I think, for me, it's the analytical side of things and sharing that with the teams. So, yes, we have the social aspect, yes, we have the commercial and the business aspect of it, but, turning the numbers into a bit of fun and creating a bit of competition and rivalry would be fantastic. And I think probably the reason why the partnership has worked well is because you've allowed us to have input into the direction of Yapster as it's grown. And I think, for me, that's being part of the roadmap and understanding the direction that Yapster are actually going, and understanding how that aligns to Tenpin's sort of strategic objectives would be very helpful. So being part of your next steps, being sort of privy to your plans for the next, 12, 18, 3 years would be very helpful.
That's actually been the biggest, because this is obviously the first time I've founded and grown a business. One of the coolest things for me is that we couldn't afford you to consult if we wanted to. And so the fact that leaders like you and then your various colleagues and some of the other customers that we're fortunate to work with, the fact that actually we can have these conversations and you can de-risk the roadmap for us has been it's cool. It's cool that sort of works sort of virtuously. It's a win-win. Got another question here, Jamie. I hope you don't feel too unloved, but I think this is for Graham. With employee benefits high on the agenda right now, how do you sell this into potential team members? Graham, I know you've had us integrate your sort of reward and recognition platform anyway. So in some ways, I think your sort of social leadership and your benefit strategy are aligned, but it'd be interesting to hear your view on it in terms of answering Kieran's question.
I think over the last 12, 18 months, obviously, there's not an awful lot that could have been given to anybody. I think what we've tried to do since reopening is recognise those hardworking individuals by putting numerous different platforms in from a rewards point of view. I think, it's nice, we've put some financial rewards in there. We've given employee discounts and employee benefits. I have worked, if I can drop the sort of InBev side of things in with this, Rob, if bringing suppliers into the mix as well, so to speak. So, it's not just about us rewarding the staff and us giving verbal recognition and financial recognition. It's about suppliers acting as partners within the business for them to deliver it. So we've done a deal with InBev at the moment where they're actually on board with our internal Yapster communications, where they're talking to our staff and giving out rewards themselves. So I think, there's an element of, yes, it's great giving, discounts for purchases that they make outside of the business, allowing spot rewards that we do within the business, and obviously your standard bonus and performance related KPI benefits. But I think you can round all of that up, but I find that the biggest benefit that I can give is when the senior team or senior staff members give recognition and rewards verbally to a team member. It means a whole lot more. And I think, for me, this is a great platform, but it'll never be being out in the field and patting somebody on the back and saying thank you.
Yeah, great.
That answers your question, but
no, it does. And I wasn't expecting the big reveal on InBev, but I think that's really innovative because, of course, the sort of the reward gateway SSO integration is awesome, and that clearly gets a lot of usage. But I think involving suppliers, again, because it sort of touches on Jamie's point about how learning exists everywhere, has been really interesting. So their Stella Artois Perfect Pour campaign, and then enabling their account managers to be a part of your network, albeit sort of subject to the controls that they need to adhere to, has been really powerful. I saw a Yap to some sites that had Corona on draft, which I know is something that InBev are doing that's new. And I just thought it was really interesting that colleagues were getting pretty invested in asking for lime peelers and various sort of paraphernalia that I didn't realize was important, but actually for the InBev account manager, we'd never be able really to have those direct relationships with those sites that are invested in his brand. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't really think of that as rewards traditionally, but of course it is. So that was very cool. I've got another question here. CPL have been an excellent open partner, clearly. Graham, what would your advice be to industry software platforms who aren't willing to integrate and collaborate? And Jamie, I'm going to throw that over to you as well after Graham's giving his 10 cents.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. If they weren't prepared to integrate, I don't know if I'd entertain a conversation. You know, for me, a one-stop shop for everything is an absolute, you know, it's a simple business route for every single employee. You know, you log on, there's one password you're in. One password then gives you full access to all areas of the business. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I think for those people that don't see this as an opportunity moving forward, then perhaps they may fall by the wayside in the future.
Interesting. What do you think, Jamie? I mean, particularly as now you're sort of, would you consider yourself to have the best of both worlds now, sort of being best of breed in some senses, but also part of the Access Group? Oh, are you on mute? Or have I? Yeah, you're on mute, Jamie.
Space barred. So I think, I don't think there is clearly there are some kind of examples where maybe it's a bit more challenged, but often it comes down to, I don't generally it's down to appetite. I think it's usually down to resource. It's a challenge, and there's lots of considerations for resource for suppliers to kind of take the positive spin on it if I can. I think the other side of it, in terms of from our perspective, is we've always been open often, and I think we're in a good position now being part of a bigger business. But every conversation I've had has been around openness of kind of what's best for the customer. So to Graham's point, if it's a case of to do something with another supplier to improve things for Graham's team and for what Graham gets from his business, then why wouldn't we do that? So I think it's to me, it's a kind of relatively simplistic proposition. It's just a case of getting those roadmaps aligned, which is often the challenge when it comes to things like this, because it's often complex.
No, I agree. I mean, it's easy to describe what an integrated sort of vision would look like, but when you've all got different platforms, different priorities, different competing customer pressures, it can be hard to deliver. From my perspective, like, we've absolutely relished partnering with you, and then of course, Access has just recently added Trail to the Access family. Like, Joe and the founders there, are great guys as well. So it feels to me like the industry's moving towards this interesting hybrid space where you've got conglomerates that have got families of products, but actually because they've effectively been acquired, there's sort of integratability, not that that's a word, sort of imported into the DNA. Because actually, for example, I'm assuming that there's going to be some roadmap for collaboration between CPL and Trail, but of course those two products were built independently. And so I think provided there's a continuing commitment to allowing sort of third-party products outside of the family to also participate in that journey at people like Graham's direction, that feels like the sort of Goldilocks solution that's potentially good for everybody. So I think you're setting a good example there. And now you're officially one of the big boys. Cool. All right. Well, we've had a load of people jumping into chat saying that SSO seems to be the key, and I would agree. Gentlemen, thank you for being so generous with your time and insights. Oh, I'm just going to ask one more question because we've got 6 minutes left on the schedule, and if you're both happy to give us the full time that you allocated. I've got just another question actually from Duncan, which is, how important is it to have an active champion within the organization driving the culture that engages Yapster as a communication hub? I was lucky enough to have Laura Jobs really embed it, and it's great to hear that it's continued to grow. Is that the same phenomenon in other businesses? Well, I'll jump in and answer that first. Yeah, a champion is really important. I think what's interesting is that like your culture is clearly what you do, not what you say. So one of the things I found interesting, Graham, you talked about being with Ten for a very long time, and I'd be interested in how the culture's changed over time and which elements of the culture have been consistent all the way. Because our experience has been that a champion is super important to get going, but the long-term viability of the network depends on the sort of authentic health of the underlying culture. And it's whether that endures then beyond the champion. I think that's one of the interesting things about the 10-pin case study, because you've got great leaders, you, Duncan, of course, you mentioned Laura, and then you've also got this sort of underlying culture where the numbers would suggest that that's resilient, almost independent of the champions. What's your view on that?
Culture, I mean, as I said, I haven't been with the business 30 years. I've seen culture comes from the leader of the company, right? And I've seen different leaders over many years bringing in different ways and different beliefs of how to do things. The key thing here is, as what I said, is care for your people. If you're caring for your people and you're providing a training facility, a communications facility, you're giving clear communications, you're making access to training, access to anything that they need within the business simple, then, realistically, you will get engagement. Reward and recognition is absolutely key. But I think you can't make one person, in my opinion, singularly responsible or a champion, because if that person goes, then everything falls down. So there's many people within every organization that champion different elements of that business. And I think key is having the right people in the right places that believe and work together collaboratively to deliver a brand, to deliver a product, to deliver a service. And when everybody's on the same level, working in the same direction, and you've got a happy and an engaged workforce, then your business becomes successful.
Yeah, that's certainly what I've seen in my experience. Like, champions leave some of their DNA in the organization, but ultimately it's about the ongoing. You can't really fake that, actually, not in the numbers, not ultimately. You see the health of the organization when you look at the numbers all the way through. A champion gets you going, but if it's only the champion, then it can be a bit of a sort of artificial sugar high. Jamie, we'll finish off throwing that over to you. You must see various levels of success across the CPL customer estate. What's the impact of a strong champion versus a strong culture from your perspective?
I think if you put a product in place and don't back it, it can work. But I think if you put a product in place and people can help embed it, and then it becomes, with a champion or whatever we call them, and then it starts to kind of have its own legs and go from there. And as it gets engaged with the different levels of the business, I think that's where the kind of real power and opportunity is. I think that's where we see, the best examples of when there are multiple use cases from the same functionality that work differently for different teams sometimes. And even within the integration that we built, people can interpret it in slightly different ways based on what works for them even in the same business. So I think it definitely helps, and I think it's an important thing to note. I don't mean to kind of teach on it to suck eggs here, and it's a relatively kind of operational thing to say, but the importance of people helping a new product embed, or even a new integration embed together. It doesn't just happen. It takes work, and it takes focus, and it takes ideas, and it takes a way to engage teams and get them to understand it. Even if it's a communication platform and a learning platform that you learn together, people still need to know how to communicate and still need to have, where to learn. So I think that kind of focus is really important to make it work, because it can there's a lot more value it can bring when that focus is given to it.
That was great, Jamie. Thank you. And thank you both so much for your time doing this. And thank you everybody that's watching. It's been participating in the chat and in the Q&A. I understand that this is streamed successfully on LinkedIn, so hopefully we'll get some further input from our industry peers through there now and afterwards as well. So both, thank you so much. For anybody that's watching, Graham probably doesn't want any more spam, so I won't give you his email. But Jamie, I assume that folks can reach out to you through LinkedIn, or where else is the best place to get you, or one of your trusty colleagues?
So if obviously LinkedIn, or jamie.campbell@cpllearning.com. If anyone wants to pepper me with any questions, then I will happily respond.
Fantastic. All right, and I'm also rob@yapster.co.uk. Thank you, everybody. Thank you both. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks,
everyone. Thanks, Graham. Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers.